Most artists overcomplicate fur drawing, but today we're drawing this zebra using just 2 pencils. Also make sure to stick around till the end where I'll be sharing a few tips and tricks that artists usually don't explain openly, especially when it comes to making fur look realistic using charcoal. So let's get started. Okay, so let's start outlining the dark zebra patterns directly with your charcoal pencil and start building the stripe using back and forth flicking strokes placed close together. The key technique here is to keep your pressure light at the start, press slightly more in the middle, then release again as you flick out, because that creates thin ends and a darker center, which is exactly how real fur behaves. If you press hard from the start, your strokes will look blunt, and the zebra will start looking like it has marker lines instead of fur. So always lighten the start of every stroke, and only let the pressure build in the middle. Now keep moving downwards and follow the flow of each stripe, because these patterns are not random blocks, they are like hair direction maps. If the direction is wrong, even perfect shading later will look messy. Always keep in mind that you are not drawing stripes, you are drawing hair that happens to be striped. That mindset saves the whole drawing. You might be wondering why we are not drawing the curved border of the stripe first and then filling it in. And the reason is that the border stays trapped underneath. Later when you add fur strokes, that hard outline starts peeking through and it becomes extremely difficult to hide. So it's better to create these stripes using fur strokes from the beginning, so the border stays soft and natural. Also, don't stress about making every stripe perfect because zebra patterns vary naturally, and you can always adjust thickness later by either extending dark strokes or covering edges with white strokes. Now move to the right side where the reference is blurry, and here you can lightly define the general shape first using small curved strokes, then fill it more thoroughly but still keep the flicking motion so it doesn't turn into a flat marker patch. Now outline the eye with a sharp charcoal tip. Start with one curved stroke for the eyelid fold. Then add a second stroke right beneath it, slightly longer and stretched to form the eye shape. Now carefully extend it downward to create the bottom lid as well. Place the iris with a clear circular shape. Darken the top area for shadow and place the pupil while the grid is still visible, because after blending the grid fades and pupil placement becomes annoying. Beginners often make this mistake of not adding enough details when the grid is still visible and later end up guessing their placement. So it's important to include teeny tiny details during the outlining process. Add a few small strokes inside the iris for early texture and add tiny dots on the upper eyelid area so it doesn't look too smooth. Keep on defining the darker stripes until the whole area is done. Once the dark patterns are in place, lightly texture the white areas using your charcoal pencil with very low pressure, using quick back and forth motions to create a soft fur texture. You're not trying to make it dark, you're just giving the paper a fur base, so the white pencil has something to blend into later. Now switch to your white pit pastel pencil and start adding lighter fur strokes between the dark stripes, using the same flicking motion, keeping thin ends and a slightly brighter center. Slightly overlap your white strokes onto the dark ones, so there isn't a harsh barrier line between light and dark. If you leave a clean border between black and white, the zebra turns into a barcode and nobody wants that. If your white strokes look dull, just like mine, and you feel like your pencil is failing you, then keep in mind that it's usually not the pencil. It's the loose charcoal powder sitting on the paper. That powder makes the white pastel slip instead of stick. So lightly blend the light areas with a dry brush using tiny circular motions, keeping pressure very low. After that, gently blow off the excess dust, then go back with the white pencil and you'll instantly see the strokes becoming brighter. After the white strokes are in place, lightly extend a few darker ones into the light areas using charcoal so the fur merges naturally. This step is important because without those connecting dark strokes, the white can look like it's sitting on top of the paper instead of being part of the fur. Repeat the same sandwich process for the next patterns, but make sure to change the stroke length and direction slightly to keep the fur natural. Now let's move to the brightest area above the eye. And because this part needs to look clean and glowing, remove excess charcoal first using a scribe eraser or regular eraser. Use small circular motions with very low pressure and erase gradually so you don't damage the paper surface. If you press too hard while erasing, you'll scratch the paper and the white pastel will refuse to blend smoothly later. Once the base is clean, layer white pastel gently using small back and forth motions and still keep a slight texture even in highlights because pure flat white looks unnatural. A little texture helps it stay consistent with the fur around it and makes the highlight feel like fur catching light instead of a blank patch. Then lightly blend nearby light areas again with a dry brush and build the brighter fur strokes with overlapping flicks, gradually reducing stroke length as you move down to stay inside the stripe. Now you can add soft charcoal strokes between some white strokes to separate strands, keeping pressure very low so it stays subtle. Now it's time to add details to the eye, and this is where the drawing starts feeling alive, so take it slow and enjoy it. Start by adding straight white strokes inside the iris using a sharp edge of your white pastel. A good trick is to keep the tip of your pencil slightly flat and use the sharp edges. Then rotate the pencil as each edge wears out, so you keep getting thin strokes without sharpening constantly. Keep adding those strokes as you move around the iris. Change the stroke angle slowly so the texture follows the round shape. Also vary your pressure because if every stroke has the same strength, the iris texture becomes uniform and it will look printed instead of natural. A real iris is like a messy fingerprint. If it looks too neat, it stops looking real. Now define the pupil edge and add a bright curved outline along the edge of the iris with white pastel. Then clean the edge using charcoal if it looks messy. You can also adjust iris size with this method by tightening the border slightly. Darken the pupil if needed and then carefully blow off excess charcoal instead of wiping. Now it's time to add the shadow at the top of the iris by flicking charcoal downwards from the lid area, so you create a soft gradient. After that, add a little depth with small circular shading on the left side. This will add so much dimension to the iris. Now start to place thin dark strokes between some white strokes to separate them. Keep pressure low because you're not creating black lines, you're creating separation. Now carefully extend the darker rim around the iris using tiny inward flicks all around. This will make the iris look more natural and realistic. Now add a thin curved white stroke inside the iris to help it look round. Make sure to keep it thin so the iris shape stays correct. Okay, now it's time to bring the iris to life by adding the reflection of light. Think of this as adding the sparkle that says, yes, I have thoughts. Without this part, the zebra is emotionally unavailable. Grab your electric eraser and add small strokes of different lengths on the top right area of the iris. Now go over those erased highlights with your white pastel pencil. This is where the eye starts looking wet and alive instead of dry and confused. Finish it off by adding a thin curved highlight line along the top edge of the iris with very light pressure. And trust me, this tiny highlight does more work than half the shading, so don't skip it. For the dotted texture on the upper eyelid, use charcoal pencil and start stippling, keeping dot sizes random so it doesn't look stamped. Keep in mind that the tiny details like these are what separate nice drawing from wait, is that a photo? Now move to the neck. And because it's blurry in the reference, you can keep everything softer and more blended. Fill the lighter neck stripes directly with white pastel using small circular motions, and you'll notice this instantly pushes the neck into the background. This part is oddly satisfying, like smoothing icing on a cake, except the cake is a zebra. Now soften the boundary between light and dark using a small dry brush with very low pressure and small back and forth motions. It will immediately make the stripes look blur and sit behind the face naturally. If any stripe still looks dull, reset it with the electric eraser, then layer white pastel again. Many beginners are afraid to redo an area, so they keep layering on top of muddy texture, and it only gets worse. So never hesitate to reset it and then rebuild it cleanly. Now it's time to add eyelashes, and you can simply place the tip of your charcoal pencil on the lid and flick it down to create curved lashes with needle ends. Lashes should be longer and thicker at the outer corner and gradually shorter and softer as you move toward the inner corner. And make sure to slightly change direction and length so they don't look like a comb. If lashes disappear into the dark base, add a light layer of white pastel underneath first and then draw the lashes again so they pop clearly. Just like this. Let me share a few tips and tricks with you while we keep layering the fur using the same techniques you've already learned. Most artists accidentally ruin a perfectly good drawing simply by trying too hard. One big mistake here is treating white fur like empty paper. White fur is not paper, it's more like milk in coffee. If you don't mix it properly, it just floats there looking awkward. And if your white stripes start looking dull, don't blame the pencil. That's usually charcoal dust sitting on the surface like loose flour. The white pastel just slides around and refuses to commit. A quick clean with an electric eraser gives you a fresh surface, and suddenly the white starts behaving again. Around the eye, edges matter a lot. If the bright stripe under the eye looks messy, it usually means the edge wasn't cleaned first. Think of it like eyeliner. If the edge is clean, everything looks intentional. If it's not, it looks like you rushed. Another common mistake is trying to make every stripe equally bright. That's how the drawing turns into a zebra crossing instead of a zebra portrait. Some stripes need to stay softer so others can shine. Contrast is what makes the eye pop, not pressure. Keep in mind that depth doesn't come from pressing harder. That just creates angry lines. Real depth comes from sneaking in tiny dark strokes near bright areas. It's like adding shadows under furniture. You don't notice them, but without them, the room looks fake. And if a dark stripe looks flat, it's usually missing texture. Solid black is the enemy of realism. Fur needs tiny interruptions. Otherwise, it looks like you colored it with a marker during a power outage. Again, keep in mind that the brightest stripes always need the cleanest base. Using an electric eraser first is like priming a wall before painting. Skip it, and no matter how good the paint is, it won't look right. And finally, the neck. This is where beginners overwork everything. Blurry areas are meant to be quiet. If you over-detail them, they start shouting and stealing attention from the face. Soft layers and gentle blending keep the neck in the background where it belongs. If something looks off here, don't panic and keep layering like it's a mistake buffet. Step back, clean it, and rebuild it calmly. Most realistic drawings are just a series of tiny fixes pretending to be confident decisions. And just like that, you've got a zebra face that looks detailed, clean, and realistic, using only 2 pencils. And if your zebra looks slightly different from mine, that's actually a good thing. Every drawing has its own personality, just like every zebra has different stripes. The important part is understanding the technique and knowing how to fix things when they look off. Also, I just launched the HR Studios Academy. So if you're an absolute beginner and want to learn drawing from scratch, you can join my course here for 90% off. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.